the Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes?
Greetings, I'm Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer of the USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for start at -25-1752.1. I am the Admiral in question, and today we're going to be talking about updates to our onboarding process. But before we do that, let's talk about various upkeep, maintenance and administrative issues. So, first thing, we record these every week at Tuesday, 12:30 South African Standard Time, or at least we try to record them every week. We stream them live on Discord. If you're an active duty member of the Dauntless crew, you can join us in Discord in the screening room channel. You can participate in the chat and you can address me directly if you wish to. We also do our best to stream live to YouTube. That usually works. It seems to be working today. So if you're not an active duty member of the crew, you're welcome to join us there. There's a chat room there, which I can usually see, and hopefully I'll be able to respond to any questions or comments you might have there. If you are in either of the chat rooms and you have a question or query that you need me to see, something that you'd like me to address in the Q&A section at the end, please make sure that you @tag me so that I know that you're addressing me directly. You know how to do that in all the various places. Just make sure that you tag me directly so that I see your message when I'm scrolling back up through the chat so that I can address your comment. So it's not just for the room, it's directly for me. Otherwise, I might miss it and then question will go unanswered. Next, who are we, why we're here, what are we doing? So USS Dauntless is a future-focused action and advocacy group that is at its core a Star Trek fan club. We're a chapter of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated, which is the largest organized Star Trek fan organization in the world, and has thousands of members in hundreds of chapters in dozens of countries around the world, and we are one of those chapters, based in Cape Town, South Africa. Although that is our physical headquarters, we do most of our operations online via Discord, so we are able to facilitate members in various places, all over the place. So physical headquarters is in Cape Town, but actually we're pretty active online. That's probably where we do most of our stuff. So members all over the place. Without that out of the way, let's talk about today's episode. And I expect that today will be relatively brief because today we're talking about the updated onboarding process for 2026. So as I'm recording this, it is January 2026, and January every year is typically when we like to do our policy updates so that we're not changing stuff all the time. We like to leave things to settle for a few months, for a year, basically, since the last round of updates, see how things shake out, look for any pain points of areas that we could tighten up or make more efficient, or stuff that might be whatever, things that aren't working. And we try to come up with possible solutions for things that we can improve come the next round of policy updates. And that's exactly what we've done this year. This year, we're making basically two updates, and both of them relate to the onboarding process. So instead of talking about the updates, we're going to actually just do an updated version of the onboarding process, which we've spoken about before. So I did a video about the onboarding process, I don't know, 2 years ago. And most of it is the same. So I'm going to go through first. Okay, let's explain what the pain points are, and then we'll go through what the old onboarding process looked like, and then I'll show you what the new onboarding process looks like with the new changes. So why the protocol changed? So the previous onboarding process, again, which is largely unchanged, but it was designed to be welcoming. It was designed to be relatively flexible and dynamic and as forgiving as possible. Reason being that we wanted to give new recruits a soft landing so that they could take their time to get up to speed and learn our processes, learn our way of doing things before becoming fully functioning members of the crew. And that worked very well for motivated recruits, for new members that were super into it and wanted to get engaged like an active Dauntless crew member. But what we noticed over time was that recruits oftentimes would enter the system and then disengage without formally exiting. So the only way to exit the onboarding process, well, there were two. The first way was to just send somebody a message saying, hey guys, I'm not interested in doing this anymore. Please exclude me, in which case we would treat that as a retirement. And the other way was to go through the existing system called AWOL and deserter. So AWOL deserter system was policies that we introduced, I think it was this time last year. And those talk about how we manage members who have disengaged and basically time out. It tightened up the way that we handle that process. So if you are AWOL, that means that you've made no contact with the Dauntless crew for a period of 1 month. And if you've accumulated 6 consecutive AWOL flags on your file, then you become what is called a deserter. In other words, you've left the crew and we basically kick you out because we can't have disengaged members. If you're not engaged, you're not a member, right? We require that engagement in order for you to function as a member of the crew. That was the only passive way of exiting the crew that we had implemented. And it was administrative and it was punitive and it was slow. And it was intended to be slow because we wanted to allow established members an opportunity to deal with whatever it is that they're having to face in their life that's pushed them to disengage, and give them time to come back into the fold again once things have gotten squared away. So we're assuming that everybody is acting with the best of intentions, that they're not communicating with us because they're busy dealing with something else and they don't have time or capacity to keep us in the loop about it, and that they will be back. And only once somebody has been gone for a protracted period of time, 6 consecutive months, then we're going to assume that they're not coming back and they have in fact deserted us. So that was the previous system. So all new recruits who entered the onboarding process were then would disengage, so they would go passive. They would then time out eventually through that system. So long periods of silence required commands to either chase those recruits or to try and interpret their intent, try and figure out who these basically strangers, who they are, what their situation is, and try to intuit whether we should be waiting for them, whether we should be holding a space for them, whether we should be sending the police to go look for them, that kind of thing. Silence gives us very little information, so we have to do the best with what we can. There is a process that allowed recruits to extend their orientation process because they were having a hard time deciding which department or team they wanted to serve in, but called the extended orientation program. But the extended orientation was automatic. So if the recruits had not decided which department they wanted to serve in after a reasonable amount of time, that wasn't a set period, but after we felt that a reasonable amount of time had passed and they still hadn't made a choice, then they would be automatically assigned to the extended orientation program, which meant that they would then rotate through the various departments on the Dauntless 2 weeks at a time. They'd spend 2 weeks in this department, then 2 weeks in the next, and 2 weeks in the next. The idea being to give them exposure to every department on the crew, and that would then furnish them with the information they needed in order to make an informed decision about where they wanted to serve. So if they were passive, they would just coast through the system, eventually going into extended orientation, and then after 6 months they would AWOL and become deserters. So in other words, there was no clean early way to resolve disengagement without using the systems that were meant for established crew. So we had these systems set up for crew members who've been with us for months or years, and they were applying to these day one recruits, which was probably inappropriate. So it wasn't that it was bad faith, it's that the issue there was ambiguity, right? The old system assumed a certain kind of momentum, but it didn't require that momentum to be demonstrated. It didn't require the recruit to actually have shown their sustained interest in the Dauntless. They only needed to have signed up once in order for to kick off this entire process. So let me give the outline of what the old onboarding model looked like. Again, mostly unchanged. We've just added a couple of new items to the list. So first thing they did was that recruits would submit the application form on the Dauntless website. They would provide all of the personal information that we need in order to manage their membership. They would also give us their privacy preferences, which is a requirement under our privacy policy and various international privacy laws. In other words, how they would prefer us to handle their personal identifiable information. And then they would give a digital signature that they agreed to that information. Once we receive that once they receive that application, the applicant, not yet a recruit, the applicant would receive a welcome email saying, welcome to the USS Dauntless. These are some of the things that you need to know about what's happening here. This is your direct superior, the recruiting officer. This is the away team that you belong to. Your rank is crewman recruit, unless they already possessed a rank from somewhere else. And that email would crucially include a link inviting them to join our Dauntless Discord server. Now, we established a couple of years back that it is mandatory for all Dauntless crew members, whether that's active duty or reserves, they have to be on the Dauntless Discord server in order to be a member of the crew. So they are required to follow that link, and in doing so, they then joined the Dauntless Discord server. That then marked their transition from applicant to recruit. Now they're on the Dauntless Discord server. We would welcome to the server, and the recruiting officer would commence the orientation process. So what is orientation? Orientation is a 5-day course that it's 5 to 10 minutes per day, just a little bit of theory, a quick multiple choice exam, and the recruit would need to score 100% on the test in order to advance to the next day. Once they've completed that 5-day course, it was then their responsibility to decide which department they wanted to serve in, one of the various different departments, and then submit an application form for a standard position within their chosen department. If, once again, they took a long time to make that choice, they would automatically be pushed into the extended orientation program from there. At the point where the recruit selects assignment to a standard position, so in other words, they choose which department they want to serve in, that marks the end of the onboarding process, and now they become a full-fledged member of the crew. So that was the old onboarding process. That was basically what it looked like. There's a lot more happening in that process from the command point of view, what we are doing in order to facilitate the onboarding. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of admin, but from the recruit's point of view, those are the steps that needed to go through. So problem with that was that the recruits joined Discord and they were integrated very early into the Dauntless community. The orientation timelines were flexible in practice. Even though it was a 5-day orientation course, there was no functional time limit beyond the 6-month AWOL limit for recruits to complete the process. So 6 months to do a 5-day course is ridiculous. Obviously, you should be able to do it in 5 days. But you know, if life gets in the way, it shouldn't take you longer than a couple of weeks to squeeze in 5 days worth of 20 minutes intervals. Especially if you're taking it seriously. It meant that recruits could remain undecided after their orientation virtually indefinitely, again, for up to 6 months. Even if they were in the extended orientation program, there was no natural end to that program. They would just keep on cycling through the extended orientation over and over and over again, and eventually they would just time out. And that meant that silence would keep these recruits in process without any clear status. And when I say silence, I mean silence from the recruit. So this is a recruit that's not engaging socially or organizationally with us, and they're just going through the process because they're not communicating, and we're just doing all the paperwork behind them, channeling them through these various programs. What this did was it created uncertainty for the recruits, and it created a massive unnecessary workload for command. So here we come with our changes for 2026. So the design goal of the updated onboarding protocol is to not make onboarding harsher or more bureaucratic or anything like that. The goal is to make our expectations explicit early on, to establish visible timelines, and to make the expected outcomes clear for everybody involved. So that's for us and for the recruit. So the 3 new elements that we're adding to the onboarding process are as follows. The first thing is what we are calling the recruit intake briefing. So this is going to happen between the welcome email. No, not between the welcome email. Apologies. So this is going to happen between joining Discord. So this is the point at which the applicant becomes a recruit. They've just joined the Dauntless Discord server. They are now a member of the crew. Between that and commencing orientation. So before the recruiting officer begins the 5-day orientation course, the new recruit is required to subject to a recruit intake briefing. What this is a relatively brief face-to-face video briefing with a member of the crew, typically the recruiting officer, but it can be any member of the crew that the recruiting officer has designated for that function. Important factors about what this briefing looks like is, again, relatively short, has to be on camera, right? Both participants need to be visible to each other so that we can verify that you are in fact a human being, or at least a very convincing AI. The officer conducting the briefing must not be the officer that recruited the recruit to the Dauntless in the first place, right? So this needs to be a member of the Dauntless crew that the recruit has not yet met, has not yet encountered. Reason for that is we want to create an opportunity for that new recruit to establish a relationship with a new second member of the Dauntless crew. So if the only member of the crew they knew was the person who recruited them, that person will typically, by the way, be assigned as their mentor through the onboarding process. But we want to make sure that there's a second person that's conducting this interview, so we can establish early on, right at these early stages of onboarding, a personal connection between the new recruit and a second member of the crew, so that you don't have a connection and communication bottleneck that's funneled through only one person. What that briefing will contain is a quick rundown of what the expectations are of the crew, of the recruit during the onboarding process. So outlining exactly what I've explained to you today, the 5-day orientation course, the time that they'll need in order to select a position, the availability of the extended orientation program if they want it, and then also things like mandatory expectations that are true of all Dauntless crew members. Things like must retain their Discord server access. They need to check in with a direct superior every 30 days in order to not go AWOL. And they need to attend priority 1 away missions if they happen to arise during the orientation process. They are not immune from those effects. So explaining those expectations to the new recruit, then giving the recruit an opportunity to ask any questions they might have about those expectations right there and then. Again, we're not expecting these briefings to last longer than 5-10 minutes, should be relatively quick and easy, and then the recruit can go about their business. 2 important administrative details about the recruit intake briefing. One is that it is recorded. So it has a video record, which can be made available to the recruit if they want. The reason being, we want to make sure that there is a second acknowledgement on record that the recruit has heard and understood and agreed to the expectations that are placed in them by the Dauntless crew. And the second thing that is, and it's so that the rest of the crew who are not in the meeting are able to get a sense of who that person is. And again, this is not going to be available to the entire crew, only to the command staff, but the command staff need to be able to review that information. And again, will be available to the recruit if they would like to have a copy of it. Yes, okay, so that is the recruit intake briefing. This, what it does, if it goes ahead, is it answers, it allows us an opportunity to preempt and answer questions that the recruit might have. But it also provides an early screening opportunity because it allows us to see whether or not the recruit will actually attend that briefing. And if a recruit has joined the Dauntless and hasn't fully appreciated or understood the expectations that we have on that recruit, which happens fairly often, I think, they might not anticipate that these kinds of face-to-face interactions are part of what we do. And if they're not comfortable with that face-to-face interaction, or they're not engaged enough to even schedule or attend that session, that gives us the information that we need about the recruit, that this is not a person who's serious about being a member of the Dauntless, and maybe they don't belong as part of our crew. And that's fine. Not everybody is cut out to be a member of the Dauntless. Just because you're not a Dauntless officer doesn't mean you can't be a member of Starfleet. There are hundreds of other chapters out there that would love to have you, that have a very different way of operating. Some of them are just a Facebook group. Some of them are just a WhatsApp group chat. Some of them aren't even that, right? Their email list or whatever it is. That's not us. That's not the Dauntless. Here on the Dauntless, we set a different standard, and we require active engagement from every member of the crew in order to remain a member of this crew. So it allows us to learn that very quickly, whether or not this recruit is going to be engaging with the process. And once the recruit intake briefing is over, then the recruiting officer can initiate the 5-day orientation process. The second change that we're making to the orientation process is around timelines. Up until now, it's been pretty much indefinite. The orientation process can last up to 6 months because, again, it was going through the AWOL/deserter timeline. So if the recruit disappeared and stayed gone for 6 months, then eventually they would go through that disciplinary process, which we don't want. That is an awful lot of time and admin for us to spend on somebody who is effectively a stranger to us. And we don't even know if they are serious about becoming a member of the Dauntless crew. We're happy to invest that kind of time and admin on somebody who has been an established member of the crew and has that career momentum behind them. But somebody new, somebody we don't know, we don't necessarily want to be investing all of that in them. So we are introducing a much shorter timeline for timing out of the onboarding. And we're basing this on, we look to the military for inspiration on a lot of these kinds of things. The military have an idea. If you've watched enough military movies, you'll recognize this concept. The idea of basic training. Basic training is usually the first training thing that you attend when you become a member of a military organization, or perhaps a new division within the military. And it's intended to put you through your paces to see if you're capable of meeting the expectations of the organization within that new field of service. But it also gives you, as the recruit, an opportunity to see if you feel comfortable continuing with that branch of service. And if you are not comfortable, you have the opportunity to withdraw. On the Dauntless, the ability to withdraw just looked like sending us a message, retirement, right? That was active withdrawal. But we've noticed that more and more often recruits are passively withdrawing and just not sending messages. So now we're offering a separate way out for passive withdrawal. And that is the new thing that we're introducing here, the change, this new concatenated timeline. And we're basically putting it into a 30-day window. So from the moment you join the Discord server, which means that you are no longer an applicant, you are now a recruit, you have 30 days to complete your 5-day orientation course. Again, 5 days, you have 30 days to complete it in. In fact, you have 30 days to complete the entire onboarding process. But when you complete the orientation course, that resets the clock back down to 0. And now you've got 30 days to do the rest of it. What is the rest of it? The rest of it is requesting assignment to a standard position. Now, if you apply to the extended orientation program during that process, which is now no longer automatic, by the way, that is the third change. If you apply to the extended orientation program, then that pauses the clock. So you're no longer limited to the 30-day clock. If you've actively requested extended orientation, you can then pause that, not forever, but until further review, right? If the command crew feel like you've gone through all of the departments too many times and you're still not engaging and you're not making a decision, then they can decide to end the extended orientation program at any time and resume that 30-day clock, but it pauses the clock until further notice. So 30 days to complete orientation, resets the clock, 30 days to complete your transition to the crew. Now, what happens if that clock runs out? If you run out of time, if the 30-day clock is up, then we introduce a new exit strategy called Recruit Entry-Level Separation, Recruit ELS. So if a recruit disengages or fails to progress within the 30-day timelines, then onboarding ends cleanly through an ELS. So it's an administrative process. It's not a disciplinary one, and it doesn't carry any kind of stigma. It's not a red mark on your record or anything like that. It exists solely to resolve the onboarding failure early and humanely. So if we think of, excuse me, my non-humanoid companion is causing drama. This is Harris, by the way. This is Huey's brother. Huey was the one who was disruptive last week. And there we go. Right, so again, if we think of the military version of basic training, the way that you end it early is you do a thing called washing out, which is also formally called entry-level separation, but the generic term is washing out, and you can basically just walk away. And that is what we are offering recruits here. If you're dissatisfied with the onboarding protocol and you decide you don't want to continue, you can wash out. You can walk away, disengage, do whatever you need to do. And when that time runs out, we will simply remove you from the roster as if it never happened, right? As if you never signed up. So it's clean, it's not punitive, it's simply administrative. We're going to stop putting administrative energy into recruits that aren't interested in engaging, and we're going to stop wasting each other's time, essentially. So let's just do a quick recap of what the revised onboarding protocol looks like from the recruit's point of view. Yes, Harris does want to engage. He is an active, engaging member of the crew. So he has noticed another cat in my backyard through this window here, and he would like me very much to open the door and let them play, but that's not going to happen. Thank you, Lieutenant Davis. I see you there. Thank you for joining us. We'll catch you next time. We're almost done anyway, I think. All right, so recap of what the new onboarding protocol looks like from the recruit's point of view. So step 1, submit the application form. Step 2, receive the welcome email, which contains the invite link to the Dauntless Discord server. Join the Dauntless Discord server. Receive a message from the recruiting officer to schedule the recruit intake briefing, which again is going to be relatively short face-to-face video call with either the recruiting officer or with a designated representative. Once that's done, you have 30 days to complete the orientation 5-day course, which is again conducted via Discord by the orientation officer. It's worth not the orientation officer, the recruiting officer. It's worth noting that at the moment, our recruiting officer is a semi-automated bot, so not actually a human being, although a human being has to push the button to make the recruiting officer do its thing. And there is a real Discord account behind that recruiting officer hologram. Sending direct messages to the recruiting officer are probably not going to result in meaningful conversations. But hopefully that'll change. There is a vacancy for the recruiting officer, so any member of the crew who would like to fill that position, it is available. You may go through the induction process for that. Apologies, I'm getting sidetracked. So recruit intake briefing with recruiting officer or designated representative. Next step is the orientation program, 5-day course, relatively quick, 20 minutes, half an hour per day, if that, won't even take you that long. A quick 3 to 5 question multiple choice test at the end to make sure that you've retained what we were looking for, and then you move on to the next day. Once you've completed all 5 days, the 30-day clock resets, and you've now got 30 days to select which department you would like to serve in. In theory, you should at this point already have all the information you need in order to choose which department you'd like to serve in. But if you feel like you don't have enough information yet, and if you're sincerely interested in making that decision as seriously as possible, if you really are taking that seriously, you can request the extended orientation program, and you can then rotate through all those departments a reasonable amount of times so that you can get a sense of the culture and the activity in each department, so you know which one you would actually like to serve in going forward. Once the onboarding ends, and it ends by you requesting assignment to a standard position to one of the departments, that is the end of the process, and now you're just a member of the crew. So there are no hidden stages and there are no indefinite waiting periods. The only indefinite period there is the duration of the extended orientation program, but that is intended to be a dynamic experience negotiated between the recruit and command, the recruiting officer, so that it's not going to go on indefinitely. It will go on indefinitely, but not forever. All right, so in closing, in summary of what we've spoken about for now. Support is available for recruits, flexibility exists, but initiative must be visible. And that's essentially what we're talking about here. We're talking about rewarding engagement by being actively engaged and dynamically participating in the process. Silence goes nowhere, right? Silence doesn't help. Means that you're not an active member of the crew, and silence means you'll be quietly removed from the roster. This update helps to ensure that joining the Dauntless reflects deliberate, timely commitment, not prolonged uncertainty, while remaining fair, respectful, and transparent to everyone involved. Okay, so let's look at questions or comments. If we have any, checking the Discord chat. Okay, good. That was the greeting at the beginning. Commander Shamali says that I'm an incredible CEO. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Commander. And there's Lieutenant Davis greeting on her way out. Thank you for joining us for as long as you could. Appreciate seeing you today. Just a shout out to everybody else who's in the chat today. We've also got Colonel Hubert. We've got Captain von Schwenen, and I think that's all. Yes, that's everybody who's joined us today. All right, but my yeoman, as is her custom, has submitted a few questions to help clarify today's points. First question, what if someone's life circumstances change during onboarding? So this is not unusual, or it's not impossible. Hopefully it is unusual. Somebody decides to join the crew because they have capacity and everything's going well, everybody's healthy, everything's fine, but halfway through onboarding, they lose their job, or a family member gets ill, or they suddenly have a baby or something like that, and their circumstances no longer allow them to continue being as active as they had planned or hoped to be. Now, this is exactly what the new system is structured around. And that's why it's now structured around communication rather than perfection, right? So we don't expect anybody to be perfect, but what we do expect is transparency. That the timelines are clear now, so that everybody can see where they stand. So there's no traps, there's no hidden trapdoors. If a recruit is engaged and communicating is the key, then command can respond, right? We can take whatever actions we need to take. We can offer extensions, we can make exceptions, but it only works if communication is present. The new system, what it does is it resolves silence and disengagement. Silence and disengagement. Those are the two killers of a community like ours. And this allows us to resolve those relatively quickly. It doesn't deal with honest difficulty. That's the kind of thing that we can manage on a case-by-case basis. Second question. Isn't this going to scare off people who are just shy or unsure? Possibly. And it's kind of intentional in sort of a narrow sense. The process isn't trying to filter out uncertainty. It's trying to filter out indefinite hesitation, right? So uncertainty in the short term is perfectly acceptable, right? You're going to come into this process, you're going to learn a lot of information, and you are going to be uncertain up until the point that you're not anymore. But being uncertain indefinitely is going to hamper your career, right? So you're going to need to make a choice at some point, understanding that in the future you may be required to make a different choice. The intake briefing and the extended orientation, they exist specifically to support people who are unsure but are still engaged. So it's the engagement that matters, not the uncertainty. And what we're removing from the process is the assumption that uncertainty can be passive. So that's what we don't want. We don't want that passive uncertainty. We want people to be actively uncertain, right? If you're uncertain, we want you to be engaged. We want you to be asking questions, reading the material, watching the videos, doing whatever it is you need to do to help resolve that uncertainty. Just sitting back and waiting for somebody to give you the answer, that's what we don't want. Next question. Does recruit entry-level separation count as a disciplinary action? No. ELS is explicitly non-disciplinary, so it is not a red mark on your personnel file. It doesn't carry any stigma. It's not considered a reprimand. There's no adverse record. If you decide to, if you have gone through ELS and you decide to reapply later once things have improved for you, it almost certainly won't count against you. There will be a record in your personnel file, because by that point, a personnel file will have been created for you and will have noted that you went through ELS, but we're not going to hold it against you, not in and of itself. It's more like withdrawing from a course. So you started a course and you realized you couldn't finish it, so you just withdrew it, rather than being removed for misconduct. It's not like you're being kicked out because you misbehaved. It's just that you've decided not to continue. So we don't hold it against you. It's not disciplinary. It's simply an administrative process. All right. Any last comments or questions from the crew? None. I don't see anything on the YouTube chat. So that means we are basically complete here. And I would like to leave you with this thought. The onboarding process is designed to support you, but it requires visible commitment. If you want to be here, step forward and engage. Engagement is how we know you are ready to continue. Thank you. That is all for today. You are dismissed. Swart out.